Morning all, it's Angus Campbell here. It's about 6:30 on the morning of Friday the 23rd of August. So following a call a couple of days ago from SRM in Aberystwyth, the A70 Lightning crank work and crankcase repair work has been completed. So we're driving over there this morning to collect. It'll be about 3.5 hour drive or so from the East Midlands to Aberystwyth, but needs to be done. Looking forward to collecting it, and I'll bring you back once we arrive and see if we can do any or a bit of filming once we get to see John Jolly and the crew at SRM. So hopefully the journey won't be too bad, with it being school holidays still, getting around Birmingham, etc. But I'll bring you back a little bit later on. Okay everyone, time now about 10:30 on the Friday morning. Just arrived at SRM, so that took about 3.75 hours actually. Bit of traffic, not too bad, dreading going back, but anyway, let's pick up the parts and I'll lay them out in the boot of the car and we'll have a look at them. Okay, all paid for and parts picked up. So just to remind you, firstly we had the repair on the crankcase. In this case, with this engine, with the left-hand rod having let go, we were lucky that the parts didn't explode out through the front of the crankcase, which is usual. It just left quite a deep score, so that's been repaired. There was a slight puncture in the front here, but that's been repaired. So the crankcase half is all good, and obviously this is very important because this is the left-hand crankcase half. And we've got the all-important engine number there. One thing I have noticed actually with this, which I hadn't noticed before when stripping it, is that when the disaster happened, then obviously there was a lot of whiplash in the primary drive side, and you can see that the primary chain is cut into one of the casting mounting points for the stator. But anyway, not too much damage done, so that'll stay as is. So that's the crankcase half. And underneath here then we've got the crank, which has had the big end reground to -30 I think in the end. The mains were good, but it's all been dynamically balanced. And I did ask the question about the fact that the crank and rods hadn't been built up, because I thought with dynamic balancing then the rod and pistons obviously had to be specific to one side of the crank once balanced. But apparently in this case there was so little difference in the weights between the rods and the pistons assemblies that there's no need to be specific as to which side the rods and pistons are assembled. So that'll be the first job once we get home. So we've got the rods here, which I provided, also the pistons which I provided, and then we've got a new primary side main bearing and new big end bolts too, and also the -30 shells. So we'll hit the road again, probably find a cup of tea somewhere first, hit the road, and we'll get back to the East Midlands pronto. Okay everyone, 10 to 3 in the afternoon, back home. Not too bad a journey on the way back, a bit steady in places, but traffic not too bad. It's just a bit of a long way to go, but in some places it's quite a scenic route along the A44. But anyway, back in the East Midlands, just opened up the garage. You can just see the old A70 Lightning chassis in the corner there. We'll just get these parts in, settled in, get a cup of tea, and then we'll have another quick look through. Okay, back in the garage, replete with a drink, much needed after 7.5 hours on the road today actually, but yeah, I don't feel too tired. Mid-afternoon, sun shining, bike sparkling, even though there's a big hole in the middle of it. But let's have a look at a few bits and pieces. So, firstly, left-hand crankcase half repair. God, that's heavy, isn't it? You think with one hand. not too bad a job. Filled in the groove. There was one tiny little pinhole breach in the cover, but from the outside then done a pretty good job at masking that and repairing it. I have to do a little bit of work in getting the right sort of texture back in that, but there is a technique whereby with a rubber mallet you gently tap some really coarse grit emery, and that puts this sort of casting finish back in. This has got to be cleaned up a lot just yet anyway, but obviously it's not going to come out as shiny as that. We don't want it as shiny as that. We need to put a matte back into it. We might have to do that with some a bit of bead blasting or sand blasting, but anyway, that's repaired, which is great because again, this is the most important side with the engine number. So let's just think how we're going to do this. Actually, there's the rest of the parts for the engine there, all ready to be cleaned up. Let's just put this on here for now. So another parcel there to open too, which I think is the home that's arrived. We'll do that in a sec. Right, back to the packaging. Oh, excuse my sniffing. One crank. Looks similar to standard A65 crank, but is deeper, wider, long stroke, and this has been had its big end journals reground. The plain main was fine, just a little tiny bit possibly of a score, but we've already measured it up, and it's well within tolerances, as is the bush. That's in the, what will it be? Let's think, which way around are we doing it? That's the timing case, so that's the right hand crankcase half, yeah. The journals, they've covered the journals up with tape to protect them, but I was told that they had to grind this down to -30, which is quite a lot off, and I believe that's the maximum reground. So we've just managed it. But anyway, dynamically balanced, and I was shown the equipment on which they do that when I originally dropped the parts off, so I know they've done a good job on that. What they've done then is returned my two con rods and the two pistons, not in the original boxes actually, but because I know the part number of substandard pistons off by heart. I mean, these are labelled as well. I bought these from Bantam John, and these are actually labelled A70 pistons, but there's a part number on there which is 71266. You can just see it on the bottom of the label there, stamped into the piston. So 71266 is a standard piston for A70, and these are different from A65 because the A70 is a long stroke motor. Then the gudgeon pin hole has to be higher in the piston, so the crown doesn't go quite so far up. So those are my parts back, but they had to have those to weigh those, so they could put the correct weights on the crank for dynamically balancing. And apparently, the combined weight of a piston and a rod and bearings on each side was almost equivalent. So therefore there's no need to separately mark at which side these need to be fitted, apparently. So I had a good discussion about that at the shop before we left. And then obviously what we've got left are the parts to fit this together. So apologies while I try and do this with one hand. Oh, bear with me, I'm just going to have to... So, firstly, new big end bolts. Got to make sure we torque those up properly. And then in the bag we'll have 2 pairs, hopefully in here, of -30 big end shells. Let's just see what the label says first. It doesn't say specifically, and this doesn't look like a shells box to me, but anyway. Yep, we're right. There's the 4 shells. And then this is a new not what's on that label. It's not a footrest rubber. This is a new, what is it, ball or roll? I can't remember. But anyway, it's the primary drive side main bearing for this side. The original 1/2, I think actually it's probably taper roller. Anyway, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was fitted and they tested it, and it had some play in it, so a new one, so that's fine. As I said before, the reason why the plain bush has survived is because obviously the oil feed is on that side, and the sludge trap was caked up, so there was no oil going to the left hand rod, but there was the oil going to the plain bush timing side main bearing, and also to the right hand rod, but the right hand rod was still a little bit scored, left hand was destroyed. So there we are, all back home. So we can now think about scheduling the work. Well, scheduling, that's a bit professional really, but thinking about when we can get the work done to put this engine together. I won't be hanging about too much with it, because I'm quite keen to at least get the bottom end together without the covers or probably the gearbox in, but with the barrels and pistons on, so we can at least slot that into the rolling chassis, and then we'll build up the rest of the engine with the foundation in the rolling chassis, which makes it easier to do. But first things first, we'll need to spend quite a bit of time cleaning up the case. There's still a bit of work to do on the case that's been repaired to clean that up, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of cleaning to do on these cases and polishing on the external cases as well. They've been sat about in various guises in various places since 1980, which was the last time this was on the road. Okay, so there we are. That's it, all home and ready to go, and we'll begin putting some videos together and building this up in the near future. In the meantime, just to let you know that I decided not to take the head in all that way to Aberystwyth, and that's because on a further review and inspection of this, then the engineer who did some machining for me on several parts, I'd forgotten that he'd also completed machining the domes and the remainder of the head, so that all that's left to do on this head now is to insert the valve seats. So I'm going to see, well, I know that there are companies locally that can do this as bespoke jobs and make up the correct valve seats from the correct material. So what we'll do with this is we'll prepare this by firstly inserting the valve guides, and then that gives them a good datum point to aim to when the valves are in, with respect to where the seats need to be, and also what outside and internal inside diameter those need to be. So we've probably got 2 parallel projects on the go now, and we'll probably do sort of alternative videos and mix between the two, so we can keep both of them going. First thing to bear in mind as well is that we need a hone for both the Fury barrel there and for the A70 barrel, which is in there. We know the A70 barrel is in pretty good condition. There's no ridge in it. So once the dial gauge arrives that I've ordered, then we'll measure that up with the standard pistons to make sure we're within tolerance, and then we'll just do a light hone to basically glaze bust that barrel, so the new pistons and new rings will run in. If the barrel is out of tolerance, I do have plus 40 pistons, and we'll have to get the barrel bored out to suit the plus 40. We won't be able to do that with a hose. There's just too much metal to take off. So without further ado, let me just unwrap this package, because I think this is the hone, and I'll bring you back just to show you that once I've unwrapped it. Yep, so there it is. One hone has arrived. This has got adjuster for variable tension on it. Also got a flexible rod on it, and this is for honing bore diameters from 2 up to 7 inch. So the Fury bore is 63 millimeters, so that's about 2.5 inches or so. And can't remember the bore size on the 750 Lightning, but significantly bigger. Right, okay. So there we are. Bits and pieces all over the place, so I need to do a bit of a tidy up first, but as this is on the A70 Lightning primarily, there's another shot of the rolling chassis, and we'll begin to think about getting the bottom end together and into that very shortly. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that little diversion, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.